Hello class, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this video. I hope you're having a great week. We are moving right along with this course. I know feels like it's moving fast, but we are now transitioning into our note-taking, study skills, and test-taking strategies week. And you can see here the title of this lecture here is Note-Taking, Study Skills, Test-Taking Strategies. Oh, wow. I did make a note. It is cheesy, I know, but I hope it sticks. It kind of works, right? It's kind of Wizard of Oz-y, so it kind of sticks. I don't know. I had to put it there. But anyways, I hope that you are doing well, and I hope you are taking care of yourself this semester. And just know, you can reach out to me at any time, and it doesn't always have to be assignment related, class related. If you have any questions or need help with educational planning and you need connections with different resources, just know I am more than just an instructor. I'm also a counselor here at Chafee, so just know you can always reach out to me. But you're all doing great. You're doing a great job. I've been enjoying reading all of your submissions for your assignments and your discussion board posts. Very impressed. You're all doing a fantastic job this semester. But let's go ahead and jump into this. And I know the first week I asked you all about what are some things that you are really looking forward to learning about with this class. And I would say a good percentage of you mention note-taking skills, study skills, test-taking strategies. So I know this is a really big week for a lot of us here because these are some skills that will help you to become a successful student. And I want you to think of this class so far as kind of like a melting pot, right? So I want you to think of we're sprinkling in ingredients slowly throughout the semester that are going to contribute to you being a successful student. We've talked about resources. So you've learned the resources available through you, and I've continued to share those with you throughout the class, from success centers to centers like our transfer center and DPS. We've also talked about mindset, developing a growth mindset, and how to identify those areas of our lives that we have a fixed ways of thinking and how we can transition to that into a positive growth mindset. When we've talked about time management, we're slowly adding these ingredients into this symbolic pot, if you will, of student success. And now we've reached a point to where now we need to know some hard skills. How can we study? How can we prepare for tests? And how can we take proper notes? So let's go ahead and dive in to the week. So the first question I want to ask you all is, why do you think some students earn good grades and others do not? Now, I know some of you might say, well, I don't know, maybe some of them, maybe they're just smart. Maybe they just were blessed with, great math skills. Some of us I know might think that. And maybe some of you are sitting here thinking too, well, maybe they work hard. And yes, that's true. They work hard, right? That is definitely a component there. And I've mentioned this earlier in our class as well, but the students who do well, that get good grades, that are reaching their goals, and are successful students and successful in their work environment as well, are students that are prepared. Students that work hard, yes, definitely, but they use their resources and they go above and beyond. And we're going to talk about what that means to go above and beyond, but earning good grades is achievable by everyone. It's just how to make sure that we're using the right strategies and going about using the right skills in the right environments. So I want you to think about that though, because if you're someone that's saying, hey, I've traditionally gotten good grades and I just want to make sure I can maintain that through college, great. If you're thinking, you know what, traditionally I haven't gotten good grades and I'd like to change. And now that I'm in college, I want to do some things different and I want to do well. Great. If some of you are thinking, I don't know, I've kind of been here and there. I've gotten some good grades here. I've gotten some bad grades here. I don't know. I'm just kind of taking this class because, I needed to get some extra units. Great. Like I've said before, I'm glad you're here. But regardless of your thoughts on this, I want you to begin to think of earning good grades, not as this just abstract, fixed thing that students automatically just have because they're a smart student inherently, or they're just gifted. As we've talked about with mindset, these are things that can change. We can adapt, and we can grow, and we can earn good grades. And it takes some of those elements we've used from the prior weeks, and also learning some new skills. So let's look into them. So here's some basics of study skills. Okay, we're going to start with the basics first. Okay, and the first thing that's important is to, first of all, just to be prepared for class. I know that sounds simple, but it's incredibly important. That means when you show up to class, and if it's online or if it is in person, have your syllabus ready. Know what your teacher, your instructor is going to talk about that week. Know what the reading's going to be about. Know what the topics are. Kind of get into that mental headspace to know what to expect for class. It's going to help you be able to take notes and to be able to be effective in your studying. Okay, attend every class. Again, I know that sounds so simple, but it's so important, and it can be incredibly tough. But it is highly recommended to attend every class, engage with the material, and that means asking questions, taking notes, talking and working with your classmates and reviewing notes together. Being in class is half the battle. If you're not in class, you're missing the lectures, you're missing important key terms and important aspects of what's going to be offered on the tests. So if it's simple, if you're not there, you're going to have a hard time succeeding. So you need to be at every class. And if it's a class that's online, that means don't miss a week. That means signing in multiple times a week and really making sure that you're reading through all the material and not missing any pieces of information. Also, to location, sit front and center. I know also this is one of those things where you might be thinking, well, there can only be a certain number of students sitting in the front, right? And if I'm not sitting in the front, I can still do well. True, that is true, but it's recommended to be at the front. Here's the reason why. Because if you're in the front, chances are you don't have as much distractions as you would in the back of the class. If you're in the back of the class, that's usually, you might have students sitting in front of you, so it might be hard for you to see the board. You might have to really, peek your head around. Sometimes, and I'm guilty of this as a student, a lot of times students who sit in the back of the class, they'll use that as an opportunity to maybe, catch up on emails, make sure that they're, maybe doing some other things besides studying. So it might, if that's the reason why you're sitting in the back of the class, you're not engaged. So you're not paying attention. And if you're in the back, the teacher can't notice. It's just a way to kind of disengage yourself from the class. And again, I'm not saying that every student who sits in the back of the class is disengaged, but by sitting in the front of the class, you are front and center. You're able to see the board more clearly, listen to the professor without distractions, and usually I would say it's recommended by most professors to try to be in the front. Take notes. Take notes, and we're going to go over how to take notes in this module. In this lecture, I'm not going to go over which types of notes. You're actually going to read about it in an article I've posted, but we're going to actually talk about specific ways to take notes. It's not just freely just writing random information on a piece of paper. There's actually a technique involved, so we will talk about that. Also, too, take notes when you're reading. One of the things that has been studied and studied and studied, and research has been collected on this for years, is retaining information. And students and people in general, not even just students in college, but we forget. We forget 42% of the information we take in after only 20 minutes without review. So if you think about that, if you just sit there in class and don't take notes, or you read your assigned reading for that week and don't take notes, you're going to forget a lot of that information 20, 30, an hour from 20, 30 minutes, an hour from that point. You're going to forget a lot of that information you just learned. Taking notes allows for you to make sure that you're staying present in those moments, but it allows for you to review and go back and to be able to really read through that and really soak in that information at a later point. So taking notes is incredibly important. It does take effort and energy, but you will reap the benefits later. Okay, so the next one on here we have is know your campus resources. We know we've talked about that, being able to know, where to utilize the success centers, especially for tutoring, if you need some tutoring help, or even utilizing the DPS center if you need more time to take tests, or if you need some assistance when it comes to taking notes. Understanding the resources that are available to you will help you study better. Read and retain your syllabus. A lot of the information that's covered in your courses are in the syllabus. So the syllabus really kind of gets you into that frame of mind. And again, it goes into the preparation and understanding what to prepare for that day of class. It's your guide to the class. Understanding and knowing your syllabus will prepare you for the future. Also, schedule time for studying. We've talked about time management in this class already, and that's one of the most important things is setting time aside specifically for studying. If we just say, oh, I'll study later, we can get easily distracted. We are all busy. A lot of us are working. We have kids. We have, jobs, and, we have maybe extracurricular activities. Some of us are involved in sports. It's easy for us to fill up our time. Or even to do things that we love, that are fun, spending time with people and reading, whatever we have that we like to do is that for fun, our schedules can get filled pretty easily. But if we can set time aside specifically for studying, chances are you have a higher chance of sticking to it, and you'll be able to really monitor how much time you do study, 1 to 2 hours preferably at a time. Review for exams. Of course, we're going to go that into a little bit more detail. Placing your assignments on your master scheduler and create plans for completing them before they are due. Again, this goes back into organizing and to know when your assignments are due, keeping track of your syllabus, marking them down on calendars. I know it's listed on the syllabus, it's listed in your course details, especially in an online class on Canvas, but also writing them on a calendar, it just, again, puts it in another place. You won't forget it. You'll have it in multiple locations, you'll know when your assignments are due, and students who are prepared and have an idea of how long their assignment's going to take and when it's due, completing them before they are due gives you a chance to fix anything. If anything is messed up, the professor can contact you ahead of time and say, hey, we're missing this, or hey, make sure maybe you might want to fix this. It gives you a chance to be able to maybe edit if you need to. Complete all of your assignments. I know this also seems very, you would think this is just expected, but, there's a lot of students who think, well, as long as I do well on my tests, I'll be okay. But by completing your assignments, you are preparing yourself for the tests. A lot of professors and classes will set up their classes in sequential order. So the assignments you're doing are building upon each other, leading up to a test. So the assignments aren't usually at random. They are purposeful. So by you completing all of them, you're not only better understanding the material, but you're preparing yourself for the test. Have someone read your papers before you submit them. Huge. A lot of students submit papers right before it's due, right at midnight, and there's grammatical errors. It doesn't make sense. There's, sentences drag on. Have someone proofread them. A lot of times, it's just somebody saying, hey, yeah, this sounds good. It makes sense. But having somebody read through it will catch grammatical errors. They'll let you know if it's coherent. It's just adding one more set of eyes before you submit them. It could be a friend. It doesn't have to be a tutor. It could be a family member, friend, significant other, anybody. Ask questions. This one also seems very, you would just think that this is a basic skill, but not a lot of students ask questions. But I want to encourage you to do that. I think sometimes students think, oh, if I ask this question, someone's going to think I'm dumb or I don't understand the material. And that's not at all the case. Chances are the question you're about to ask, there's probably 5 or 6 other students that have the same question, and you're doing them a favor. Asking questions is a way for you to better understand the material, and it engages you with it, and it gives you a chance to rephrase the material in your own words. which also helps you retaining the information. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And if the class is online, email the professor, just like me. A lot of you have asked me questions through email. That's great. That's perfect. So, find ways to ask questions if you need to, especially if you don't understand the material. Complete all assigned readings at the time it's assigned, and utilize study groups. I know some students may prefer to work alone, but study groups are great because it gives you different perspectives and it gives you a way to learn from somebody else, and they might have caught something that you didn't catch, and that way you can all work together and make sure everybody's on the same page. Again, it's just adding to that work ethic, adding to reviewing the material over and over and over again. Now, in terms of note-taking, one thing that you all need to be aware of is that in order to be a good note taker, it's all in the preparation. It's all in the preparing for the actual either lecture or if it's, from textbooks, whatever it is, preparing will help you to succeed. Now, again, you're going to go over specific note-taking strategies. We're going to, there's the Cornell method. There's a few other methods that are great, and you'll actually have assignment on it this week. You'll learn about those in the next article. So I don't want to go over it here because you're going to read about it here in a bit. But I do want to talk about strategies for you to prepare for note-taking. And the first thing that is really crucial is really looking at the difference between nonverbal communication, active listening, and also being able to annotate through key information from both the textbook and from the lectures. So it's really important to be aware of both. So when I'm talking about nonverbal communication, what I'm talking about is emotional nonverbal communication. So when you're watching a video or watching a professor or reading a book, look at that person in that video or in that lecture, your professor in person, and watch them for their emotional cues. Emotional cues, it could be, sad, excited, frustrated, serious. That's one way to really understand to kind of better grasp the information. So the being able to understand nonverbal cues with the emotional aspect is important. The other thing too is body language. So watching the person in the video or watching your professor and watching specifically their body language will also point out potential important information for you to take notes on. So like, for example, if your professor moves closer to the whiteboard to write something, it's probably key information. Or maybe they move close to the front row and fold his or her arms to indicate that what they're going to say is more serious. That's something to take note of. Watching how the professor looks facially with their emotions and with their body language can also be a telling sign for which pieces of information that you need to take down in your notes. Another important trait too is active listening. And active listening, there's a lot of ways that you can become a better active listener. And when you get a chance, I'd like you to watch the video from the reading, and I'm going to be putting that in the module. But there's 5 ways to listen better. I'd really like you to watch that video. So watch that and make sure to kind of really look at the different strategies that he presents and see which some of those that you can incorporate in your in classes that you're taking this semester. The other key point here is annotating for key information. So when you're reading through a textbook, for example, these are some common areas that you're going to want to make sure to take notes from. So for example, introductions, there's usually from here, this is usually where important key information is found. Summaries, anytime in a book where you see a summary, that's important information. Study questions, that's definitely always a highlighted area. Topic sentences, so you'll see this too sometimes the speaker in the video, or it could be at the beginning portion of a paragraph might start off with a study question. Those are usually key points of info that will be useful, that could be put on a test or just to help you better understand the material. Also, too, glossary terms, topic sentences, anything bolded, those are pieces that you want to make sure that you write down in your notes. Those are things from the textbooks that are key, crucial, that you can review later to help you remember the material and to better grasp what's being presented. In lectures, look for the nonverbal cues and verbal cues. So in a lecture, a speaker will often have unique facial and body nonverbal cues that alert you to several things as you learn to kind of read your professor. So like I mentioned earlier, stances or movements that will kind of alert you when they will shift to a different topic or subtopic. So, they might move from one side of the room showing, okay, now I'm moving to the next topic, the next unit. Other cues that alert you in information, including verbal cues as well, which could be, that sometimes professors might announce when they're adding information or changing topics. Pay attention also to when the speaker uses any of the transition cues, which could, again, these are just some ways, and it's different from professor to professor, but these are some different cues that you can pick up on, varying from different professors, but you need to watch their body language, again, specific words they say in announcing pieces of information. This will help you in taking your notes. Now, in terms of taking notes in your class, you want to make sure that you're taking notes to remember. Okay, so what we mean by that, and I think this quote really nails this down pretty well. Note-taking facilitates both recall of factual material and the synthesis and application of new knowledge, particularly when notes are reviewed prior to exams. Okay, so you don't want to just take notes of just random pieces of information. You want to make sure this is covering what we just talked about here, right? We want to make sure it's information either in summary, study questions, bolded, glossary terms, and important information that your professor will maybe emphasize in a verbal cue or in a non-verbal cue. Okay. So, one of the things, spelled repetition wrong. Sorry about that. Hey, I'm human. Don't judge me too hard here. So, while you're taking notes in class, one thing that you really need to be aware of is repetition. The more we review our notes, and the sooner we review once we initially learn it, the more reinforced that information will live in our long-term memory. And that's what it's all about, is making sure we're taking our information from short-term memory to long-term. So once you read the article about the different ways to take notes, like Cornell notes, for example, you'll be able to learn how to take notes, but how to review the notes so that way you can remember it for the long term. And that's really what we're trying to get at, is repetition to create information to live in our long-term memory. Don't try to write down everything the professor is saying. The professor is going to go over a lot of information, and some of it will be to add on to a topic, add on to a phrase. Important information to hear, but you might not want to write everything down. Also, you don't want to keep writing the entire time and completely lose track of what the professor is saying. You want to be able to use abbreviations, don't write complete sentences, and still have a balance between taking notes and paying attention and listening to what the professor's saying and watching their nonverbal cues, verbal cues. Compare notes with classmates too. I know this might be uncomfortable for some people, especially if you feel like I don't like to engage too much and share my notes with other students, but kind of going back to the study groups, like I mentioned earlier, this is a way for you to learn from different perspectives from other students. One student might hear it one way, and another student might hear it another way. They might have caught something you missed. It's a way for you to, again, better grasp the material. So, have a couple classmates that you connect with the class that you can share notes together with, compare them, and maybe set up a study group. Always beneficial to work together, especially in preparing for tests, comparing notes. And write down what your instructor writes. If the instructor's writing it on the board, chances are it's important. So, anytime they write something down, it's usually a cue for something important for later use. Okay. Now, here's a question I have for you in terms of test-taking strategies. When do you think you should start preparing for the first test? The night before, the week prior, the first day of class? What do you think? If you answered the first day of class, the answer is right. If you answered all of them, the answer is right. So it's all of them. The first day of class, the week before a test, the night before the class. It's throughout the semester. If your mindset when it comes to test taking is, oh, we have a test in 2 weeks. Well, I better start studying for it probably a week ahead so I can remember it. That's not the way to do it. You want to make sure that you start preparing for your tests right when the class starts. Your first day of class is you preparing for future exams, and that's by reviewing the syllabus and doing the things we've talked about and taking proper notes and reviewing them. It's all contributing to the exam later. Now, here are some other strategies when it comes to test taking. Now, it's important to set it up, and that's kind of how I set it up here, is 3 different test-taking strategies: pre-test, mid-test, and post-test. So the first here is going to be your pre-test strategies here. So the first one that I want us to look at, let me go ahead and pull this information up here. Okay, perfect. There we go. So so the first thing too that you want to look at is organizing your notebook and your materials. Students that are organized and they have it sectioned off in important areas, those are going to be the students that are prepared well for the test. So if you're not good at organizing, start organizing now. Have your classes sectioned by maybe different books. Have your math class in a separate folder, your English class in a separate folder. And within those folders, organize it by week. Week 1, title the week for the important information covered in that week. Keeping organization is going to help you in the future. I know it's a lot of hard work in that moment, but your future self will be thanking you. Take proper notes from lecture and reading. And again, you're going to learn about how to take proper notes through this week's assignment and through this week's reading. And make sure to understand the material. If at any point you don't understand, ask questions. Ask your classmates, not, of course, while the professor's talking, but after class. Ask questions during the class to your professor. Meet with your professor during office hours. Don't just guess. And know that professors want you to ask. They will not think less of you. They want you to ask. That's what they're there for. And even if it's just to reinforce what you think you know, that's okay. If you just want to confirm, hey, I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. Is this right? Or if you're completely lost, ask the professor. And if the professor says, you know what, maybe see me after class, that's not a bad thing. But maybe they're saying, you know what, for the sake of this lecture, we need to keep moving forward, but come and see me afterwards and we can talk about this in a little bit more detail. And also too, to add on to this, going to success centers, utilizing your tutoring, it's going to be helpful. Study groups, like we've talked about, is incredibly helpful. Another pre-test taking strategy before you take the test is flashcards. That always helps. Writing the information down on flashcards, getting a buddy with you to ask you those questions, and the answers are written on those flashcards there so you can use those to quickly go through the material. Complete homework on time. I know that might seem very, I guess basic and I know I've said it already, but completing your homework on time again allows you to move with the flow of the class. It allows for you to finish an assignment and move on with the class. If you start missing assignments and you have late work piled up, now you're not with the flow of class. Now you're behind. Now you're having to go backwards and work on assignments that, now your classes completely move forward. Your professor's in a totally different unit. So it's important to stay consistent and be on time with your homework submission. Communicate with your instructor, active listening from the video that you're going to be watching, but also to review your notes consistently. Don't just take notes, keep them in your binder and say, I'll review these 1 week before the test or the night before the test. consistently review them throughout the class, throughout the weeks, throughout the semester. You want this information to be flowing through you. You don't want it to just be sitting in one place. You want to be consistently learning. And we've talked about this before, right? We talked about what type of, are you going to be a scuba diver with your classes? Are you going to be a wader, just kind of sitting at the surface? Are you going to snorkel, so you're kind of diving into the material? Or are you going to scuba dive? Are you going to review your notes consistently? So think about that. Use your time management skills to schedule time for studying. Put it in your schedule. You set time aside to study. It's important to do that. Sleep, also a crucial element, is to, eat a balanced diet and sleep. These are things that contribute to your brain. If you don't have active sleep, or if your sleep patterns are just kind of inconsistent, you're not getting ample sleep, and you're not eating a balanced diet, you're not eating breakfast and lunch, you're not going to be prepared mentally and physically. And those are also important for you to be able to do well on your exams as well. Need to be healthy. And study in blocks. I know we've mentioned this, but studying at least 1 to 2 hours at a time allows you to soak in the material, take a little break, come back to it. That's the way to study. Don't just study just all in at, studying 8 hours at a time. Study 1 to 2 hours, soak in the material, take a little break, and then come back to it. That way it's refreshed, and your brain doesn't work that way either. It doesn't work in cramming in 8 hours of information. It doesn't work that way. Studying in shorter blocks of time allows your brain to really understand it and learn it, and continue to move forward and grasp material in a proper way. And show up early and be prepared. You want to make sure for your tests you're not showing up late. You want to have all the time you need to be able to take your tests. Now, when you are taking the test, here's some mid-test taking strategies that I think can be helpful. 1, scan the test first. Identify point values, the format. Is it essay questions, true, false? How many questions? Understand what you're getting into. Know what you're getting into for the test, and determine how you'll start. Some students like to start with the essay questions because they know that will take them a little bit more time. Some students like to work through the exact order of how it's set up. So, you can work and start however you'd like with the test. Go with how you feel comfortable. Keep your eye on the clock. Your professor might say, hey, you have 2 hours for this test. Keep an eye. Know how much time you have. That's going to be important. Make sure you're allocating enough time for each of the areas of the test. You don't want to just be glued to your paper, and the next thing you know, your teacher's saying, hey, 5 minutes left, and you realize that you haven't been watching the time, and now you're not going to be able to answer all your questions. So keep an eye on the clock. It will help you to manage how much time you spend on each question. This is a big one. Mark the questions you are unsure of and come back to them later on. So, if you go to a question, you realize you don't understand it or you don't remember it, just put a little mark next to it and come back. Come back to it later. You might remember it later by answering questions later on in the test. It might help you refresh your memory. Don't guess right away. Come back to those. Sit where you can't be distracted. Kind of like this kind of goes back to earlier. If you sit in the back of the class, maybe you could easily be distracted, but by sitting in the front, there's nobody in front of you. Usually, it's just a professor right in front of you. But, again, sit where you're not going to be distracted from other people. Drink water. Water is incredibly important. It also, it's needed for optimum brain function. It can calm the nerves. It's important. So drink water. Bring water with you. Stretch. If your professor allows it, stretch. Stand up, stretch real quick. It can increase blood flow to the brain, gives you a quick little break. It's important to stretch when you can. And use the strategies from the test-taking anxiety in the video within this module. There's going to be a brief 2-minute video. There's some really good tips on test-taking strategies for avoiding test-taking anxiety. So those are some strategies for mid-test. Now let's talk about post-test. After you take your test, if you get some questions wrong and you don't understand why you got something wrong, ask the instructor. Figure out why you got it wrong, so that way you can correct it and prepare for the future. Just know feedback And getting something wrong isn't always a bad thing. It's a chance for you to learn and grow, especially if you can keep that growth mindset. It's something that, yeah, maybe for some reason you forgot it or you just didn't understand the question. But asking your professor what went wrong will allow for you to be able to be prepared for the future. Also, analyze your results to help you for future exams. So for example, see if most of your incorrect answers were small things, maybe such as failing to include the last step in a math item, or neglecting to double check for simple errors, or maybe you just ran out of time. So maybe you just need to realize, you know what, I need to allocate my time a little bit better. So, these are some things to look at after you do a test. And again, if you don't get the test, the percentage you wanted, check with your classmates. See what answers they got. Compare your questions and answers. Talk to the professor. This will help you for future exams. And I know this was kind of touched on earlier, but preparation is key for test taking too. And this is a great quote up here by Bobby Knight. He's actually He's a former coach. He's a former college basketball coach. A little crazy too. You may have seen videos of him throwing chairs across the gym floor. He was a little crazy, but he was very successful. And he had a couple of really good quotes. And this is one that is actually from our textbook. The will to succeed is important, but what's more important is the will to prepare. Preparing is going to help you to succeed. It's not just about, I want this, I'm going to do well. I need to be prepared adequately. So before your test, find out as much as possible before you take the test. Find out, is this test going to be multiple choice? Is it true or false? What's going to be on the test? Maybe there's a study guide. Find out as much as you can. And that goes into really knowing the test. Take care of your body. That goes into sleeping, eating well. Don't eating a nutritious diet too. That means, don't drink a bunch of Monsters and Red Bull to stay up late at night. It's eating a proper diet. Those actually do contribute to brain function. So make sure you have a healthy diet as well. Here's a couple tips too for true or false questions. So when you're taking your test and you see a true or false question, these are just a couple tips from the textbook that I thought was interesting that I wanted to put in here. Look for qualifiers. So if you get to a question and you're really unsure of what the answer is, look for qualifiers. A qualifier is a word that is absolute. So like examples would be like all or never, no, always, none, every, only, entirely. Those are absolute words. So what we'd call a qualifier. And these are often seen in false statements. This is because it is more difficult to create a true statement using a qualifier like never, no, always. So for example, all cats chase mice. All, right? That's a qualifier. It's an absolute word. All cats chase mice. Well, if you think about it, cats may be known for chasing mice, but not all of them do so. So, if you're stuck on a true or false question, look for these qualifiers. All, never, no, always. Most of the time, it's probably false. But again, this isn't for sure. I'm not saying that, hey, anytime you see this, that means the answer is false. This is a moment when you're stuck. If you're stuck on a question and you just don't know, look for qualifiers. It can help you figure and identify the answer. For multiple choice questions, try eliminating the answers you know to be false first. And also look for qualifiers, which again, we've already talked about. All, never, no, always. Also too, answers that are strange and unrelated to the question are usually false. Those usually are not going to be the answers. And if two answers have a word that look or sound similar, one of those is usually correct. So these are just, again, if you get kind of stuck, these are some ways for you to really kind of help maybe narrow down your answer. For essay questions, read the essay questions and instructions first. And really make sure to plan your time wisely. And organize your answer before you start to write. Address the answer to the question in your first or second sentence, and it may help to restate the original question. But if you know the test prior and you know that you're studying for short answer and especially essay questions, you're going to be expected to know a lot more. In essay questions, you're going to be asked to make arguments and use information from the textbook and the lectures to answer the question. So that's why it's going to be helpful to know the test and know what's on there, because if it is essay questions, You're going to really need to be able to not only just know the material, but to be able to take that information and put it into your own words to describe what's happening with that question. So these are just a couple of key terms and key points that could help you, especially when you're stuck and you are taking a test. Now, in this module, we have a video on test taking. It's really helpful. It's a 5-minute video. It's going to go in more detail of what we've talked about here. And there's going to be an article and an assignment this week on note-taking. So you're going to get a chance to apply a little bit of what we learned in this module. And again, too, this is taken from the textbook. So if you would like to read more, which I highly recommend you to do, this will be found all in your textbook in Unit 2, Unit 4, and Unit 6. Thank you for watching. As always, you're doing great. I hope you're doing well. And once this video is over, go ahead and click next to continue on with this module. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.